Up next, we have Mikah in Texas. Mikah, you are live on Transatlantic.
Hello.
Hi.
How can we help you this week?
I don't think I'm hearing y'all super well.
Oh. We can hear you.
Oh,
yeah, I heard you there.
Okay, good. Maybe it just cut at the start. How can we help you this week?
So I was wondering about genital preference and basically how and why people think that's transphobic, because it doesn't seem transphobic to me.
Right. So, my position is that some people. So I think that it's important to start from the top, because this is one of the things that the gender criticals really like to misrepresent about, like, trans rights in general. So I'd like to start by saying I think sexuality is not a choice, in that it's like mainly nature. Mainly nature versus like nurture thing. You know, you can't change someone's sexuality. It's something that you develop into. Conversion therapy doesn't work. It's torture. It's something you have. And sexuality is like based on what you can sense. Like it's a physical, like, part of you. It's an actual part of you as a person. It's not just like a choice you're making. It's not a choice or a decision. So that's the important, like, foundations for this. And then, some people's sexuality, some people are really into certain things about people, and some people don't care about certain things. Like, you often hear guys talking like, oh, you're a boob guy or a bum guy, or however they say it. Like, what are you attracted to most about, who you're attracted to? And I think for some people, genitals are something that is important to them. So they might really like penises, or they might really like vaginas. Some people don't care. Some people don't really like either. Some people don't really like either, but they're much more disgusted by one than the other. There's a whole range here. But if genitals are part of your sexual orientation, then there's not anything you can do about that. If you're like, you know what, I actually really get horny for penises, then you get horny for penises, and that's it. But not everyone does. So you do end up in this situation where someone will say, oh, I'm attracted to that woman, and then you find out she has a penis, and then you're like, oh, well, I'm attracted to her, but I'm not attracted to people with penises, and so if this got to sexy time, then I probably wouldn't be into this, and so that's kind of ended the attraction for me. And you get some people who are like, oh, well, I don't care either way, but you get a lot of people who are like disgusted at the concept of a trans person, full stop, or disgusted at the idea of a woman with a penis. And they try and, like, they'll try and mix it in with this, and they'll say, oh, like, disgusting or whatever. And then you get these other people who don't care about that, and they might say, what are you talking about, mate? Like, she's really hot. Who cares what genitals she has? And some people might hear that as like, are you telling me that I have to be attracted to penises? Are you telling me I have to be attracted to vaginas? And the answer is no. But for some people, I think it's not like a thing. It's not a problem for them. And for some people, it is a problem. And I think people often assume that everyone is like them. So that's where some of the argument comes from. But the reason I think this is such a big deal is that one of the key anti-trans talking points, particularly that's come from the gender critical movement, is to, like, one of their main successes as a movement is to frame trans rights as being in opposition to other groups' rights. It is kind of a classic strategy, but they've really gone all in on it. So, of course, you've seen them saying trans rights are a conflict with women's rights. That's like their, flagship battle cry. But they've also done it with other groups. And one of them they've gone for is trans rights are opposed to gay rights. And how they've managed to, like, build up an argument for that is to say, trans people are saying, if you're attracted to women, you have to be attracted to women with penises. And that, if you're saying to, like, a cis lesbian, sounds a little bit like, oh, you just haven't had the right dick yet, love, which is like a classic homophobic thing that straight men say to gay women. And so they want to try and sell that idea as like, oh, this is what trans people are. And, you know, of course, you can find someone on the internet with a shit opinion or whatever. They make a little collage of random anonymous accounts or whatever saying that. And then that's a narrative. And then it becomes a big argument. And when someone hears, you know, they'll say, like, do you think genital preferences are transphobic? Like, I mean, when you say preference, what does that mean? Because you might be someone who is, like, bisexual, or you're attracted to any genitals, but you might be like, well, I'm kind of feeling like today's preference is this. And it makes it sound like a choice, whereas sexuality isn't a choice. So already framing it in a way where there's so much room for misunderstanding. And then you end up with this ridiculous argument, which is a confusion over terms and all this kind of stuff, but layered on top with the fact that there are a lot of people who specifically want to make it sound like trans people are trying to force this idea. And that's where this has come from. I just never hear this point ever, apart from when I'm talking to transphobic people who are telling me what I apparently think. So yeah, I think that's like where it comes from. What do you think, Arden?
I have thoughts, but I would love to hear how Mika responds to that kind of that kickoff.
Well, I mean, that honestly makes a lot of sense, and I hadn't really seen so much nuance, because you briefly, Katy, had touched on it during like I think it was either the XX Factor or one of the Turf Wars that I ended up watching, but you didn't go into as much detail as you had gone into here, and yeah. I sort of see more, I understand more about it now.
Right. So there is...
What's interesting, though, is...
Sorry, go ahead.
What's interesting, though, is the little bit of gray area that you had sort of mentioned is where this topic sort of came up for me. Because my friend is bisexual, and they were looking to have an experience with someone who had a specific set of genitals. That way they could explore that part of their sexuality.
Yeah. Like, I think it's important to note, Mika, that like neither Katy or I are ever saying, like, we've had conversations before where we've talked about like, oh, it's maybe transphobic to say you aren't attracted to trans women, because but there's a lot of nuance to why we talk about that, because attracted to a group is a very different thing from I want to have sex with someone who has a vagina, right? Like, you're allowed to date or have sex with, assuming they're consenting, any person. You're allowed to exclude any person for any reason. Like, it's your life. We're not telling you who you can and can't have sex with. What we're talking about is like the reasons someone is looking to exclude trans people is probably based on an assumption about that group of people, which by definition is like a prejudice or transphobia. Right. And it's not at all saying like you are a bad person and you are immoral for not having sex with this person. Like, do you see like how those are like two very different like claims?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there is actually, talking of nuance, there is actually an extra layer which I didn't touch on to this, which is if you consider, like, I guess it's like a more general feminist theory, is the idea of compulsory heterosexuality. And I guess the easiest way to explain that is there are a lot of bisexual people out there who are in the closet and who are never going to come out and are in a straight relationship and have never had an experience with a person of the same sex or gender as them, because society is homophobic as shit, and it is just easier to be straight. And it forces it on people. And there are some people, and like, you know, bisexuality is not like I just like men, I just like women, or I like them both 50-50. Like, it's a huge range. Some people like, you know, 90% they like men and 10% they like women, or whatever. And there are some people out there who maybe they wouldn't have married, you know, like a woman or a man or whatever. But they might have like wanted to kiss one, and they wouldn't even do that because this like idea of compulsory heterosexuality is not just I want to do this and I feel like society's holding me back, but it's so ingrained in you that you think it is bad yourself. Like, you'd be disgusted if you had a feeling of wanting to kiss this person who's like the same gender as you or whatever. So on top of the discussion about like genitals, I've seen before from bisexual people talking, and they'll say like, oh yeah, I'm attracted to men and women, and I'm attracted to penises and vaginas and stuff, but the idea of a penis on a woman disgusts me. And like, well, that isn't your sexual orientation saying I'm unattracted to these body parts, or like I don't find, like, you're saying it disgusts you, as in this is, you know, an irrational disgust. For sure, I mean, sexuality can be complicated, but it's completely ridiculous to suggest that people's, like, how they interact with their own sexuality isn't informed by society's pressures, and part of that is homophobia, and part of that is transphobia. And the idea that trans people are just sex objects is a very common thing of transphobia, and people will, you know, can often see it like that, and they'll want to have sex and they won't want to touch you or won't want to date you or this kind of thing. And all of this is kind of wrapped up in this as well. So you might see a discussion between trans people. They might say like, you know what, some people will, you know, be disgusted at the idea of a woman with a penis, but then actually they're not, and they actually are attracted to you. And you can I mean guys like this, particularly online, all the time, and they're like, they're weird about it. Like, they're just straight weird, and they obviously really fancy you, and they obviously really want to have sex with you, but they're also kind of like disgusted at themselves. And you might see trans people saying like, you need to address your own internal issues. We don't live in a society free of transphobia. And then obviously the transphobes are saying, oh, what, so you're saying that everyone has to have sex with the trans women? No, not at all. And as I've just premised all the stuff above, obviously not. That doesn't make any sense with any of my worldview at all. But that, they don't care. They just want the ammo to say, oh, when Katy said that some people have transphobia involved in their, like, dating life, therefore she's saying that everyone has to date. Like, it's garbage. So yeah, but there is a lot of nuance here for sure, and everyone should go and consider what hang-ups they might have that are coming from racism or sexism or homophobia and all these different kinds of things, because it could make their lives better, not because I want to date someone who's transphobic. I don't want to go anywhere near someone who's transphobic. If you're transphobic, fuck off. But yeah, just the amount of times I see gender critical people saying like, oh, you're forcing gender critical people to date trans. There is no one I want to date less in the entire world than a gender critical person. Like, get bent. Fuck off. Rant over. How'd you find that, Mika?
I honestly didn't expect that there would be so much here to talk about.
I can talk about anything, mate.
Yeah, you call two people who can talk a lot. That's the issue.
Yeah.
I hear you. I would love to boil it down to genital preferences aren't transphobic, right? Like, if you want a short and simple answer, if I had like 2 seconds to answer, that's what I would say. Genital preferences are not transphobic.
It's a garbage slogan, though.
Yeah, but the problem is it's a garbage slogan, and it deserves like a 5-minute in-depth pulling apart of, well, we each did 5 minutes apiece, so obviously more than 5 minutes. It deserves a lot more of the nuance that is actually present in the conversation, because sexuality is not a simple thing. It's a very nuanced and complicated thing. And the way people treat transphobia, like, you know, the reasons people have these beliefs about trans bodies is a very nuanced thing. And while again, like we said at the beginning, I am not interested in pressuring anyone to have sex with anyone they don't want to have sex with. You're allowed to exclude literally anyone. But what you're not allowed to do is be mad at people or be violent with people if you make assumptions about them and then they fail to, like, meet your expectations of what their body or who they are is like. But yeah, anyway, we could go into like a whole different rabbit hole with that. So I'm going to be careful of opening that can of worms. But was that all you wanted to talk about, Mika, or is there maybe you can call back if you want to open that can of worms?
everything else I want to talk about would be a separate call, certainly.
Sure.
Okay.
Right on. Well, thank you so
yeah,
much.
That was it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You have a wonderful day, Mika.
Bye.
Bye.